My name is Megan Miller. I'm 32 years old. And this morning, my phone lit up with 29 missed calls from a number I hadn't seen in over 2 decades. But I didn't need to check the voicemail, because the last time those voices called my name, I was 12 years old, standing alone in Union Station. And they were in the front seat of our family car laughing as they drove away. "Let's see how she finds her way home," my mother had shouted through the open window. My father had waved like I was a piece of trash left behind. So if you're watching this, and you've ever been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect you, if you've ever had to rebuild your life from absolute nothing, hit that like button. Leave a comment, because what you're about to hear is the story of how I turned that trauma into fire, and how, years later, the same people who discarded me came crawling back, begging me to save them. But first, let me take you back to that day. I still remember the smell. Union Station had this mix of train grease, old coffee, perfume, and something faintly metallic like cold air over steel. I remember the way the tile echoed under my shoes. I was wearing white sneakers with little purple stars. They were scuffed, too small for my feet, and I kept tripping as I followed my parents through the crowd. It was supposed to be a family day trip to Chicago. Just us 3, Mom had said, brushing my hair that morning. Ethan, my older brother, wasn't coming. He had football practice. Or maybe he just wasn't invited. In the car, my father had been unusually cheerful. He cranked up his classic rock station. Bob Seger's voice drowned out my questions. "When I got the state capital of Nevada wrong," said Reno. Instead of Carson City, he made this clicking sound with his tongue. "Even a 3rd grader would know that one," he said. I was in 6th grade. Still, part of me hoped, maybe this was an apology for yelling last night. Maybe this was their way of making things right after losing their temper over a report card that had all A's except one A-, for science, my favorite subject. They said it wasn't about the grade. It was about expectations, about how excellence isn't optional in this family. So when they parked near Union Station and led me through the massive hall, I followed quietly, holding on to the glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe today would be different. We stopped near a giant marble pillar. I still remember the color, a sickly yellow tan that looked like stained teeth. "Wait here," Mom said. "We're going to park the car in a better spot and grab some snacks." Dad added, 15 minutes. Don't move." I hesitated. "Can I come with you?" My father laughed. "What are you, 5? You're 12. You can stand by a pole for 15 minutes. And then came the line I still hear in my dreams. "Let's see how she finds her way home." They vanished into the crowd. I didn't know then that I would never see them the same way again. At first, I did what they said. I waited. I counted to 900 in my head. That's 15 minutes, right. Then I counted again. And again. People passed by. Families. Couples. Businessmen. Nobody saw me. The tile felt colder under my feet. My hands were shaking. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the little paper necklace I'd made in art class the week before. Purple paper beads, glued with dollar store paste. It was already falling apart, but I'd made it for my mom. She never wore it. By the time I saw our blue Ford Taurus glide past the station window, they weren't looking for me. They were just driving by. Dad was at the wheel, grinning. Mom rolled down her window and shouted, "Let's see how she finds her way home." They were laughing. I ran to the edge of the station, pounding the glass with my fists. No one looked. They turned the corner. Gone. The next hour was a blur of panic. I tried to stay by the pillar, thinking maybe, just maybe it was a mistake. But the seconds dragged. My legs hurt. My stomach turned. I had $7 in my pocket and no phone. The lights seemed brighter, harsher. The crowds louder. The announcements more confusing. I tried to look normal, not lost, not scared, because I remembered what Dad always said, no one respects weak kids. But I was a weak kid. I was a lost, forgotten 12-year-old girl in a massive station with no clue how to get home. After nearly 4 hours of wandering in circles, my face blotchy from crying, someone finally noticed. Her name was Janet. She worked at the Amtrak information desk, red-framed glasses, gray streaks in her hair, a name badge that said 27 years of service. She knelt down beside me like I was glass and asked, "Honey, are you okay?" I remember the way my lips trembled as I lied. "They just went to move the car." "When was that, sweetheart?" I couldn't hold it anymore. I sobbed. I told her everything. The car, the wave, the words. She led me to a quiet side room with a vending machine and called station security. I still remember the words she whispered after I finished talking. "That's not discipline, honey. That's abandonment." "The police came next. Officer Ramirez." She gave me a cup of hot chocolate and asked if I knew my home phone number. I did. She called. No answer. She called again. Still no answer. I asked if she could try my dad's store. She did. Whoever answered told her, "We don't know a Megan Miller." Because by then, I wasn't Megan Miller yet. I was still Jennifer Taylor, the girl my parents had left behind. But not for long. The next 48 hours changed my life. Social services, emergency placement, court hearing, all while clinging to that fragile necklace, now half shredded from my clenched fist. They called my abandonment willful and sustained neglect, but there was no follow-through, no arrest, no charges, just a report, a number, a stamp on my file. Because in cases like mine, where the abuse is quiet, where the bruises don't show on the skin, justice whispers, it doesn't scream. I changed my name 3 months later. Janet was the one who filled out the form with me. I picked Megan because it sounded strong, and Miller because it was the name on the shampoo bottle in the foster house I ended up in. It was the only brand new thing I'd ever owned. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't Jennifer the burden. I was Megan the survivor. But I never forgot. Not the tile floors. Not the way Mom said it like a joke. Not the $7 in my pocket. And I definitely never forgot what it felt like when the voicemail played this morning.
"Megan, please. We need to talk. It's urgent. People are asking questions."
What questions I didn't speak for 2 days after the incident at Union Station. Not a word. Not to the caseworker. Not to the temporary foster parents. Not even to Janet, who came by twice just to check on me. Some kids act out after trauma. I shrank. I stayed in the smallest corner of the room, back against the wall, knees tucked under my chin. The paper necklace I'd made, now torn and smudged, was still looped around my wrist like a lifeline. My fingers kept tracing it, as if the act could rewind time, as if that crumpled mess of paper and glue could bring them back, this time with real love in their eyes. But they never came. There was no press conference, no police manhunt, no Amber Alert. Just a 12-year-old who had disappeared from her parents' lives, and no one, not even the neighbors, seemed surprised. Social services called it voluntary abandonment, which sounds so clean, like I was a box they no longer wanted in the attic. They said things like, "It happens more often than you think," or "Some people just shouldn't be parents." But I didn't want sympathy. I wanted answers. Why me?
Why not Ethan?
Why did I have to be the burden? The problem? The girl who got left behind? My parents never came to the hearing. They never challenged the custody decision. They didn't file missing persons reports. They didn't even bother to ask where I ended up. They disappeared from my life with the same energy they used to drive away from that train station laughter and zero accountability. That winter, I moved in with the Martins, my first foster placement. Evelyn Martin ran a daycare from home, which meant I spent most afternoons surrounded by squealing toddlers, sticky-fingered kids, and a lot of juice-box diplomacy. I didn't talk much at first, but Evelyn didn't push. She just left little notes on my door. "You don't have to be okay today. There's banana bread in the kitchen if you're hungry." And one day after school, there was something else taped to the wall. My necklace. The same paper one I'd left on the floor of the intake room, but this time, it was laminated, protected, preserved. Evelyn had taken it, glued it flat, and slid it into a clear plastic sleeve like it was a precious artifact. She didn't say anything, just smiled and walked past with a load of laundry. But I cried, quietly, fiercely, with a pillow stuffed over my face. Because that necklace, that was the first thing anyone had ever treated like it mattered. And by extension, maybe, just maybe I mattered too. Years passed. I aged out of the system just shy of 18, took community college courses during the day, and cleaned offices at night. Then I got a scholarship, one of those rare ones for kids from adverse backgrounds. I never told them how adverse. I picked graphic design because it felt like quiet power. I didn't want a stage. I wanted control over color, space, voice without having to open my mouth. Art spoke when I couldn't. I started working freelance at 22. By 25, I'd built a client list. By 28, I was working full-time at a boutique firm in downtown Chicago. Irony. Right, I was thriving in the same city where I was once thrown away. I changed my name legally at 13. Not just to Megan Miller, but with no middle name. Why? Because I didn't want even one syllable tying me back to Frank and Karen Taylor. Let them keep their legacy, their blue ribbons, their pristine family name. I was building something from scratch. But trauma doesn't vanish. It mutates. It shows up when someone raises their voice just a bit too loud. When I see a little girl with dark hair waiting alone near a bus stop. When I hear a woman say, "Tough love is still love." No, it isn't. And now we arrive at the present day. Last week, one of my podcast episodes, The Abandoned Files, went viral. It wasn't even the most dramatic one. Just me, sharing how healing is nonlinear, how some wounds never close, how some parents aren't just flawed, they're dangerous. I didn't name names. I didn't mention Union Station. But people connected the dots. One listener, a freelance journalist in Ridgeview, DM'd me. He recognized the story. He remembered the whispers from 20 years ago. He sent me a news clipping. Councilman Frank Taylor to announce re-election campaign with wife Karen by his side. I froze. They were running for office as a wholesome, Christian, family-first couple. They'd buried me, erased me, rewritten history. And now, they were stepping back into the spotlight. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing their campaign banners, the fake smiles, the promises of integrity, and the thousands of people they might fool again, just like they fooled our neighbors, their church, the entire town. And something inside me snapped, not in rage, in clarity. They chose this path. They put themselves in the public eye. And now, I was going to return the favor. I went to my closet and pulled out the box, the one with old papers, sketchbooks, childhood photos from the Martins. At the bottom was the laminated necklace. Still whole, still fragile. That necklace, my symbol of survival, was going to speak now. And the people who left me for dead, they were going to hear every word. Because the next podcast episode wouldn't just be healing, it would be evidence. And for the first time, the mic was mine. I didn't publish the episode right away. I wrote it, rewrote it, deleted half, recorded, deleted again. Not because I was scared, but because I knew. Once I told the truth out loud, there was no going back. You don't just out your parents for abandoning you at Union Station and expect the world to shrug, especially not when those same people are plastered across your hometown in campaign posters. Frank and Karen Taylor Faith, family, future. What a tagline. If only they'd added left their daughter at a train station and drove off while laughing. Would have made for a killer slogan. But I needed it to be more than vengeance, more than pain. This had to be surgical, purposeful. So I started where I always start with design. I opened up my laptop and built a storyboard. Clip from the old podcast, just enough to hook. Add real audio, my voice as a child, recorded for a school project. Hi, I'm Jennifer, and when I grow up, I want to be a vet. Intercut images of Union Station, my laminated paper necklace, the court documents, the old newspaper article about Frank's hardware store opening in 2005. Pull quotes. Discipline builds character. Karen Taylor, PTA Newsletter, 2008. Final slide. My face, aged but steady. My voice, calm and clear. They left me. I survived. And now you deserve to know who's asking for your vote. It wasn't a podcast. It was an expose. I hit publish on a Thursday at 6:02 p.m. By 9:47, it had over 20,000 views. By morning, it was on the front page of Reddit. Someone had tagged it @Union Station Girl. It spread like wildfire, not because I was special, but because too many people had been discarded like I was. The comments flooded in. My mom locked me out at 14. Thank you for saying this. People think emotional abuse is just yelling, but this is what it really looks like. Tell me how I can support your campaign. You've already done more than any politician. I hadn't asked for a movement, but it was forming around me anyway. Then came the backlash. Of course it did. Their supporters called it a cruel attack on a good Christian family, political smearing, fake news from a bitter foster kid. They dragged my old photos online. Some even found out about the Martins and accused my foster family of brainwashing me against my biological parents. Funny how when victims speak, the world scrambles to silence them. But I didn't flinch. I'd seen this before. America loves the idea of redemption until it's inconvenient. Then came the moment I didn't expect. An email. From Ethan. Subject line. Are you really doing this? His message was short. Saw the video. Guess you've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Not saying it didn't happen. Just saying, not everything is black and white. Maybe mom and dad made mistakes. But airing it like this. Why now? I stared at the screen. Not because I was shocked by the deflection. Ethan had always been a master of both sides. But because he hadn't written me once. Not once. In 20 years. And now, when his precious image of our family was crumbling, he found his voice. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened another email. From Jackie Tran, an investigative journalist based in Illinois. She'd seen my video. She wanted to feature my story in a Sunday expose piece for her column on generational gaslighting. Her words, not mine. She offered to fact-check everything, asked for documents, timelines, childhood school records. I sent her everything, even the old sketchbook where I'd drawn my family over and over except in mine. The girl was always outside the house, looking in. 2 days later, she called. You're not going to believe this, she said. I've dug deeper into your parents' campaign filings. They submitted a sworn statement last year that they have 2 children, Ethan, and get this, Jennifer, deceased. My body went cold. Deceased. They declared you dead. Megan. She forwarded me the PDF. There it was. Section 14C. Dependent Declarations. Daughter Jennifer Taylor, deceased, 2008. But I was alive. I was 12 in 2008. That's the year they left me. They hadn't just abandoned me, they'd erased me. Filed me under dead to protect their perfect little world. No death certificate, just a lie wrapped in paperwork. And that crossed a line even I hadn't imagined. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment, lights off. eyes glued to the glowing screen where their forms flickered in digital black and white. My own name killed on paper. And the worst part, that little girl with the paper necklace, she believed she had survived. But in their world, I hadn't. In their world, I was nothing more than a story they buried to keep the front lawn trimmed. That's when I made the decision. No more whispers. If they wanted to kill me off on paper, I'd make sure every living soul in Ridgeview knew I was very, very much alive. And I wasn't done talking. The rally was scheduled for Saturday morning, downtown Ridgeview, the town square, right in front of the courthouse that still had my dad's name on a brick from some civic hero fundraiser back in 2006. The irony burned. They were calling it a day for family. There'd be food trucks, a gospel choir, face painting for kids, and, at 11 Husrew Aim, Sharp, Frank, and Karen Taylor were set to take the stage, to renew their commitment to the people. What a joke. They had declared me dead in legal filings. They had rebuilt their lives on a lie. They had tried to outrun what they did. But I wasn't the girl they abandoned anymore. I had a voice, and I had a plan. I didn't go in loud. I didn't carry a protest sign or yell into a bullhorn. I wore a soft blue sweater, jeans, comfortable boots, hair down, minimal makeup, no camera crew, no entourage, just me. And around my neck, tucked just beneath the collar, was the paper necklace. The one laminated years ago. The one they threw away before they left me. The one I wore now, not as a child's gift, but as a reminder of who I'd become. People gathered early. Most were smiling, chatting, sipping coffee from paper cups. A man in a beige blazer handed out Vote Taylor stickers. A woman with a clipboard offered pamphlets titled Family First, the Taylor's Vision for a Brighter Tomorrow. I took one. Read it while standing 10 feet from the stage. Frank and Karen Taylor believe in second chances, strong families, and building a Ridgeview where no one gets left behind. No one gets left behind. That line made my stomach twist. I looked around. So many familiar faces. Neighbors who'd known me as Jenny. Teachers who once praised my art projects. Not a single one had asked where I'd gone when I disappeared. At 10:59, the choir finished their last song. The crowd clapped, and then there they were. Frank and Karen Taylor. He in a navy suit, her in a powder pink blouse and pearls, smiling, waving, radiating suburban perfection. But up close, I noticed at the twitch in Karen's jaw when she scanned the audience. The way Frank blinked twice too fast when he saw me standing there, center row, arms crossed. He knew I wasn't a ghost anymore. Karen took the mic first. "Good morning, Ridgeview," she began, voice warm and steady. "It's such a blessing to be here with all of you, our friends and neighbors, who've supported us through thick and thin." She kept going, about shared values, moral leadership, putting families first. I watched her lie through her teeth. I watched people nod. And then Frank stepped forward. He took the mic with practiced ease. "As many of you know," he said, "our family has been in the spotlight lately, not always for the right reasons." A nervous chuckle rippled through the crowd. "We believe in transparency, in owning our past mistakes, and in making amends when necessary." I narrowed my eyes. This wasn't an apology. This was a preemptive rebrand. I raised my hand. Politely, like I was in a classroom. Frank hesitated. Karen's eyes locked onto mine. The choir director whispered something to the staffer nearby. "Do we have a question?" Frank said, strained. I stepped forward. "Yes," I said. "Just one." People turned. Phones came out. I could feel the shift in the air, like someone had opened a window in the middle of winter. "My name is Megan Miller," I said, loud enough for the mic to pick it up. "Formerly Jennifer Taylor, your daughter." Gasps, confused murmurs. Karen's face paled. And according to your campaign disclosure forms, I'm supposed to be dead. Silence. Dead silence. Even the kids with painted faces stopped fidgeting. Frank opened his mouth, then closed it. Karen stepped forward, forced a smile. I think perhaps this young woman is confused, she began. I cut her off. I'm not confused. I'm the girl you left at Union Station in 2008. I waited for you. I begged strangers for help. You never came. I pulled a folded paper from my pocket. My name change form, court sealed, dated 2009. Proof that I didn't die. I was just inconvenient. A man near the front said, "Wait, is this real another? This was the girl from that podcast, wasn't it?" Karen's voice cracked. Jennifer Megan, we didn't know what to do. You were troubled. There it was. The gaslight. You lied, I said. You filed me as dead. You built your campaign on integrity while erasing your own child. Frank tried to grab the mic. I pulled back. This isn't about revenge, I said. It's about truth. It's about every kid who's been told they were too emotional, too difficult, too much. I reached into my shirt and pulled out the necklace. Held it up for the crowd. This is the last thing I made before they left me. Paper and glue. It meant nothing to them. But I kept it. Because I had to hold on to something. Phones were filming. Someone in the back yelled, "You left your kid." A woman up front started crying. Frank muttered to Karen, "We have to get off this stage." But I wasn't done. "I'm not here to destroy you," I said, voice low but steady. "I just want you to admit what you did and face it like an adult." Another long pause. Then Frank said it. "I don't recall the details." That was his line. I don't recall the details. That's when the real twist hit me. Because Jackie the journalist was watching from the edge of the crowd. She raised her phone, nodded. And suddenly, from the speakers came a voice recording. A grainy, years-old voicemail. "Let's see how she finds her way home." Frank's voice. Karen laughing in the background. The crowd erupted. The sound of their voices recorded from the past. Undeniable. Laughing at my pain echoed through the rally speakers like thunder across a prairie. Let's see how she finds her way home. Laughter. Car door slamming. Tires screeching. For a second, no one moved. Then murmurs. Then shock. Then something close to outrage. Someone shouted, "You monsters," another voice. "You think this is leadership?" Frank stood stiff, jaw clenched, sweat rising beneath his collar. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. Her face had drained of all color. I saw the collapse happening in real time. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet, terrifying disintegration of people realizing they can't spin the truth anymore. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking in a crowd. They were. Security moved in gently, but firmly ushering the Taylors off stage. The choir director closed her binder. The food trucks turned off their music. Even the balloon arch over the podium seemed to sag in shame. I didn't say another word. I didn't have to. The clip would go viral within hours. Jackie sent it to every major outlet by noon. TikTok, Twitter, Reddit, it spread across platforms like a brush fire in dry season. Union Station Girl trended for 3 days straight. That evening, I sat alone on my apartment floor, knees to chest, the paper necklace still around my neck. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't gloating. I was exhausted. Because no matter how much people clapped or reposted or messaged me with, "You're so brave," the damage had already been done years ago. What I wanted more than applause was something no headline could give me, a childhood I never got to have. Still, the fallout came fast. By Monday, the Taylors had suspended their campaign. A formal investigation into fraudulent declarations was opened. Local news dug into my court records from 2008. They found the social worker's notes. The psychological evaluations, the therapist's letters describing the night terrors and disassociation. All of it public now. It was brutal and oddly vindicating. One paper ran the headline, "Family Values Councilman's Abandoned Daughter Speaks Out." Another showed side-by-side photos, Karen beaming in pearls, and me aged, real, resilient, holding the paper necklace up at the rally. I didn't cry reading it. I just stared. Because that girl, the one holding that necklace, she survived more than they ever will. Then came the messages from people I didn't expect. An ex-teacher, Mrs. Bledsoe, emailed me. "I always wondered what happened to you. I'm sorry I didn't ask sooner." A retired neighbor, "Your mom said you went to a special school. I never knew. I'm ashamed." And then, Ethan. Again. This time, he called. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail. His voice sounded different, frayed, unsure. "Megan, I don't know how to make this right. I didn't know everything. I should have. Maybe I didn't want to know. But I saw the video. I heard the voicemail. I can't pretend anymore. I'm sorry." I played it twice. Not because I believed it, but because some part of me still wanted to. The next twist came from Jackie. She called the following morning, almost giddy. "You're not going to believe what just landed in my inbox," she said. "Someone on Frank's former campaign staff anonymously dropped this in our tip line." It was a folder, digital scans, photos, notes, an entire strategy doc titled "Managing Legacy Family Risks, Narrative Control for Jennifer Taylor." My name, cold, calculated. One bullet point read, "If reemerges, consider framing her as unstable. Emphasize time in foster system. Mental health concerns. Emotional outbursts." Another, "Public apology equals last resort. Only if reputation is unsalvageable." I couldn't breathe for a second. They'd had a plan. They'd anticipated the chance I might one day crawl back into the light and built counter-narratives to crush me all over again. Not a moment of regret. Not a flicker of guilt. Just PR tactics. Jackie asked if I wanted to go public with the docs. I paused. Because here's the thing, I'd already torn their masks off. The world had seen their real faces. But this was the strategic betrayal. This was the confirmation that even in secret, even after everything, they still only saw me as a liability to manage, not a daughter they failed. I said yes. We released it as the contingency files. The backlash was immediate. Sponsors pulled out. Frank's law license came under review. Karen was dropped from the board of a Christian women's group for ethical violations. But there was one consequence no one expected. One I hadn't planned for. I got an email from the Illinois Department of Vital Records. Subject: death certificate correction request, filed. Attached was a form, filed by Karen Taylor. She was requesting to have my status as deceased officially removed, with a typed note attached. "Jennifer is alive. I made a terrible mistake. Please, correct the record." I stared at it. It was surreal, like watching someone try to unpour poison from a glass of wine. Too little, too late. But it hit me harder than I expected. Because that note wasn't for the public. It wasn't even for me. It was for them to sanitize the paper trail, to make it look like they were doing the right thing now that the heat was on. And it didn't ask for forgiveness, just for erasure of the erasure. I printed it out, and with hands that no longer trembled, I walked to my window, held it up to the light. Then I burned it. Watched the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash in a ceramic bowl. I had already corrected the record. Not in court, but in the eyes of everyone who ever doubted that a discarded girl could rise again. But the story wasn't over yet, because just 3 days later, I received a certified envelope. Inside, a summons. Frank and Karen Taylor were suing me for defamation. When the certified envelope landed in my mailbox, I didn't open it right away. I stared at it for a while, thumb brushing the raised gold seal. The crisp weight of law pressed into paper. My name printed in bold, Megan Miller, defendant. I wasn't surprised. This was exactly the kind of move the Taylors would make when backed into a corner. They weren't seeking justice. They wanted silence. They wanted control again. But this time, I had something they could never reclaim the truth. I called Jackie first. She didn't flinch. "This is textbook," she said, typing as she talked. "Sue for defamation to make the victim look like the aggressor. It's not about winning, it's about intimidating you." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Then I called my attorney. Yes, my attorney. Because after the podcast exploded, a group called the Safe Voice Fund had reached out. They provide legal support for whistleblowers, survivors, and those fighting legacy systems stacked against them. They believed in me. They backed me fully. And now, they were ready to go to war. The court date was set for April 5th. Small claims, local jurisdiction. But the room was full, not because of the case, but because of the story. Reporters lined the benches. Strangers who had followed my journey came just to watch. I sat in the front row, flanked by my attorney on the right and Evelyn Martin on the left. Yes, Evelyn, my first foster mom, still sturdy, still quiet, still carrying banana bread in her purse like it was holy. She placed a hand on mine before the judge entered. "Just speak like you always have," she whispered. "You don't have to prove anything." The Taylors walked in together, matching navy and gray. Karen had on another string of pearls. Frank's jaw was tight, his eyes refusing to meet mine. I wondered if they thought this courtroom would make them feel powerful again. I wondered if they realized power no longer lived in those chairs. Opening statements began. Their lawyer painted me as a confused, emotionally unstable individual with a long history of estrangement and mental health challenges. He leaned hard on my time in foster care, dropped phrases like unsubstantiated claims and online manipulation, and described my videos as libel dressed in victimhood. It was smooth, cold, practiced. Then it was our turn. My attorney stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform. She laid out facts. In 2008, a 12-year-old girl was abandoned at Union Station in Chicago. She was taken into protective custody. No family came to claim her. No police report was filed on her behalf. And in 2022, a public campaign filing declared her deceased. Today, she stands before you, alive, coherent, and still asking why. Then came the exhibits. The laminated necklace, the voicemail, the campaign memo titled Managing Legacy Family Risks. I watched as Frank's lawyer flinched. Karen shifted in her seat, mouth tight like she was biting back bile. But the moment that cracked the room wide open, that came when Ethan took the stand. I hadn't known he would come. We hadn't spoken since his voicemail. I never replied. But now here he was, wearing a wrinkled shirt, palms sweaty, eyes red. The judge asked if he was ready. He nodded. He looked at me first, then at them. "My name is Ethan Taylor," he said. "I'm their son, and Megan's brother, though I didn't always act like it." He swallowed hard. "I remember the day they left her at the train station. I was 12. I thought it was just tough parenting. I thought she deserved it. Because that's what they told me, that she was too much, too sensitive, too broken." He paused. "I didn't know she'd never come home. I didn't know they told the government she was dead. And when I found out, I didn't stop them, because I was afraid to lose what little love I got." He turned to me. "I'm sorry, Megan. I should have spoken up sooner. You didn't deserve any of it." The room was silent. No cross-examination, just stunned faces. Karen's hand clutched her chest like she'd swallowed acid. Frank didn't blink, didn't move, didn't acknowledge a word his son had said. That told me everything.
In closing, our lawyer said,
This lawsuit isn't about reputational damage. It's about legacy, about people who have spent their entire lives shaping a lie and now find themselves choking on the truth. The judge recessed for 2 hours. I sat outside with Evelyn, sipping weak vending machine coffee.
I didn't speak.
Not because I was nervous, but because the silence finally felt like mine. Not the terrified silence of a forgotten girl, but the stillness of someone who had already won. No matter what the ruling said. When court resumed, the judge's verdict was short. This lawsuit constitutes a clear example of retaliatory litigation. Case dismissed. All court costs to be paid by the plaintiffs. Gasps. A few claps shushed by the bailiff. Karen looked like a puppet with its strings cut. Frank stood, slowly, jaw clenched so tight I thought he'd crack a molar. They left the courtroom without a word, without a glance. I stepped outside. Camera crews were waiting. Jackie stood near the edge, arms crossed, trying not to grin. A reporter shoved a mic at me. Megan, do you have anything you want to say to them? I took a breath. And for the first time, I didn't feel rage. I felt clean. I looked into the camera. I was never the problem. I was the consequence of their choices. And now, so are they. I walked away. But in the mailbox waiting at home was a new letter. No return address. Just a single sheet of paper inside. 6 words typed. We weren't supposed to get caught. The envelope with no return address sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days before I opened it again. We weren't supposed to get caught. No signature, no context. Just those 6 words. And somehow, they felt more damning than everything that came before. Not because they revealed a new crime, but because they confirmed the oldest one I was never meant to survive their story. I was supposed to disappear, fade into a system, become a cautionary tale, not a witness. But here I was, still breathing, still talking, still refusing to go quietly. The weeks that followed the trial were a blur of podcasts, interviews, op-eds. I spoke at survivor advocacy panels. High schools invited me to talk about abandonment, resilience, trauma recovery. Someone even asked if I'd write a book. But with every microphone they handed me, I remembered the day I couldn't get a single stranger to stop and help me in that train station. The day I realized silence wasn't safety, it was starvation. So now I spoke like my life depended on it. Because maybe someone else's did. The Taylors. They vanished from public life. Frank's license was suspended indefinitely. Karen resigned from all her nonprofit boards. Their suburban home was sold off quietly. A local rumor said they moved to Florida. Another claimed Arizona. I didn't care, because wherever they went, they carried their truth with them. And I had reclaimed mine. Ethan and I met for coffee on a Thursday. He was quieter than I remembered. Less polished, more human. He said he'd started therapy, that his marriage had fallen apart shortly after the trial, that he was trying to rebuild not as a Taylor, but just Ethan. We talked for 3 hours. Not as siblings, not as victims of the same storm. Just 2 people finally standing outside the wreckage, looking at the same wreckage together. Later that night, I sat at my desk, the paper necklace lying beside my laptop. I was drafting a new post, one that didn't recount the past, but pointed toward the future. I wanted it to be clean, unflinching, hopeful, but honest. Here's what I wrote. My name is Megan Miller. I used to believe my story ended the day they left me behind. But what I've learned is that surviving isn't the end. Speaking isn't the end. The end is a choice. And for now, mine is still being written. I hit publish. And then I did something I hadn't done in a long, long time. I left the house just to walk. No destination, no recording, no curated caption. Just air in my lungs, just sunlight on my shoulders, just the sound of my own feet moving forward. 2 blocks from my place, I passed a girl sitting on a bench, maybe 12, maybe 13. She had a backpack on her knees and was sketching something on a notepad. She caught me glancing and smiled shy but curious. "What you drawing?" I asked. "A necklace," she said, turning the pad so I could see. It was paper, with scribbled hearts, stars, her name in bubble letters. Something twisted and sweet tugged at my chest. "That's beautiful," I said. "Thanks. I'm gonna give it to my mom, for Mother's Day." I nodded, forced a smile. I'm sure she'll love it. And I walked away heart-aching and full at the same time. That night, I took out the paper necklace one last time. It was worn, edges soft from years of holding, but still intact. I didn't burn it, didn't throw it away. I placed it inside a glass frame, hung it above my writing desk. Because it was never just a necklace, it was proof that something fragile can survive being discarded, that paper, even when torn, can be taped back together, that symbols, like people, can be reclaimed. So if you're still here watching this, listening, wondering what the point of all this was, it's this, sometimes family isn't blood. Sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms. Sometimes survival isn't enough. You have to rebuild. You have to name your scars out loud so the next girl doesn't think she's the only one bleeding. You have to speak, even if your voice shakes, even if it's just one word, even if it's no more. Because the people who tried to silence you, they were never supposed to get caught. But they did, because you didn't vanish. So, if this story moved you, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs it, and if you've got a story too. I'm listening? We all are, and we're not looking away anymore. Story 2. My name is Amanda Bennett. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how I sacrificed the illusion of sisterhood to take back every piece of myself my little sister ever stole. I know, that's not the kind of story people like to hear. The world prefers tales of forgiveness, of women healing together over tea and tears. But not this time. This isn't one of those warm, fuzzy, we reconnected at her baby shower kind of stories. This is a story of betrayal, of strategy, of reclaiming power. And if you've ever loved someone only to watch them slowly shift their affection to the person you trust least in the world, you'll understand why I did what I did. Stephanie was my sister by blood, not by heart, and while we shared a childhood home, we did not share a childhood. I was born 3 years before her in Evanston, Illinois, a tidy little suburb north of Chicago filled with manicured lawns, Whole Foods, and anxious mothers who scheduled violin lessons before their toddlers could spell their own names. Our house always looked perfect from the outside, but perfection, I've learned, is just another word for pressure. From the moment Stephanie could form full sentences, she was effortlessly magnetic. Blonde curls, dimpled smile, a voice that lilted even when she lied. And oh, how she lied. I used to wonder if she practiced in the mirror, crafting just the right blend of innocence and confidence. But when we were little, I didn't hate her. I wanted to protect her. That's the part that still guts me. Because when we were 7 and 4, I remember her sneaking into my bed after nightmares. I'd wrap my arms around her, whisper, "It's okay. I've got you." I believed I did. Back then, I still thought love worked that way. But little cracks formed early, and they grew, year by year, widening into a canyon no apology could ever cross. At school, I worked hard, studied, earned teacher praise like small victories. When I made the honor roll in 8th grade, my father gave me a firm nod and said, "That's what we expect." The next year, Stephanie made it too. My parents took her out for dinner, balloons and all. When I won second place in the regional science fair with a working model of the Chicago L system, my mother said, "That's nice, sweetheart." A year later, Stephanie took third with a glitter-glued volcano that barely smoked. They framed her certificate. Small things, right? But favoritism isn't about fireworks. It's about 1,000 paper cuts you learn to pretend don't sting. Still, I swallowed it. For years. Because I wanted to believe love meant rising above. That I didn't need to compete with her for space in our parents' hearts. But then came Daniel. Daniel wasn't perfect 16-year-old crushes, never are, but he was mine. Dark hair that curled just slightly at the ends, a crooked grin, and the kind of eyes that made you feel seen, really seen. He played acoustic guitar and quoted Joni Mitchell lyrics in the hallway. We talked about music, about escaping the Midwest, about living in some sun-soaked city on the coast. I felt chosen. And more than that, I felt separate, free, for the first time, from the gravitational pull of Stephanie's orbit. When I brought him home, she was 13, just a kid, I told myself, when she giggled too loud at his jokes, when she made sure to sit beside him, when she brushed his arm as she passed. I noticed it all but ignored it. And that was my first real mistake. Because the night of Jason Miller's end-of-year party, while I was waiting for Daniel to come back with drinks, I wandered upstairs and found them. Stephanie, pressed against the wall. Daniel, kissing her like I never existed. I remember the sound of the plastic cup in my hand crumpling. I remember the burn in my chest, not just of betrayal, but of humiliation. She looked up, met my eyes, and smiled. Not an apology, not fear, triumph. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a message. And my parents. My mother sighed like I'd tattled over borrowed lip gloss. "She's just young, honey. It doesn't mean anything." My father didn't even look up from his paper. He wasn't right for you anyway. That was the night I stopped believing my family would ever protect me, that my pain could ever outweigh Stephanie's desires. But I still didn't walk away. Not yet. I went to Northwestern for college, close enough to come home for holidays, far enough to build my own world. And I did. I joined the campus paper. I made friends who saw me for more than what I wasn't. And then came Jake. American Lit class. Second row, curly hair, nervous laugh, and an ability to quote Baldwin and Atwood in the same breath. He challenged me. He made me feel clever. He made me feel real. This time, I kept him to myself. No family visits, no Thanksgiving. I told him I had a complicated family. He said, "Don't we all?" But eventually, the guilt came knocking. My mother asked, "Why are you hiding this boy from us? Amanda, are you ashamed?" And I fell for it, again. So I brought Jake home, for a weekend. I tried to warn him. "My sister, she's intense. She likes attention." He laughed, said he could handle it. But Stephanie was no longer a kid. At 20, she'd grown into a polished boutique girl, all soft knits and curated lipstick. And the moment she saw Jake walk through the door, I saw it in her eyes. She had found her next conquest. Dinner was a performance. Stephanie leaned in, asked about his favorite authors, challenged his takes on existentialism, smiled just enough to seem interested, not overt. Jake, he responded like any man would to flattery wrapped in intimacy. I confronted her that night, in her bedroom, under fairy lights she'd strung around a mirror. "I know what you're doing." She blinked. "What am I doing? Being nice to your boyfriend." "There's a difference between nice and calculated." She smirked. "Amanda, if you're this insecure, maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe it's you." And I almost believed her. That's the thing about gaslighting, it doesn't flicker. It glows steady, warm, familiar. Weeks later, I saw the text. Jake left his phone unlocked. I wasn't looking for anything I wasn't. But the screen lit up. "I can't stop thinking about you," he'd typed. Her reply, "I feel like we were meant to meet first." My heart didn't just break, it reset, like something finally snapped back into place. Because this time, I didn't cry on my parents' porch. This time, I started planning. And that's how we get here. To the moment I decided if she wanted my boyfriend so badly, maybe I should give her one. On my terms. The kind of man who would draw her in, faster than she could resist. The kind of man I knew she couldn't help but pursue. And the kind of man who would expose her for exactly who she was. The first time I saw Ethan Walker, he was sketching wireframes on a whiteboard, arguing very politely, I might add with our creative director, about why gradients didn't belong on a serious corporate landing page. He wasn't loud. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. But there was this quiet intensity about him. The kind of man who'd let other people take the spotlight just so he could watch the room unfold. I'd seen men like Daniel performers. I'd fallen for men like Jake, intellectual posers, who mirrored your thoughts until they found shinier ones to chase. But Ethan, he wasn't like them.
He was still.
I met him during a campaign pitch for a tech startup based out of Cambridge. He was a contracted graphic designer brought in for his clean style and quick turnaround. I was leading the marketing strategy. It started with coffee meetings, as most professional flings do. But something about the way he listened, really listened, made me slow down for once. We weren't just bonding over fonts and color palettes. We were talking about bad family Thanksgivings, about grief that lingers in adulthood, about the weird hollow that comes from being the responsible one in every room. It didn't feel rushed or fragile. It felt like walking into a room I didn't know I needed and realizing it had been waiting for me. And still I hesitated. Because by now, the scar tissue over my past wasn't just there to protect. It defined me. I was cautious, guarded. Ethan never pushed, never asked for more than I was ready to offer. When he told me he'd grown up in Vermont with a single mom and 3 sisters, I flinched. Not because of the sisters, but because I wondered what would someone like Ethan do if he ever met mine. It took me almost a year to let him into my world fully. He never complained, never questioned why I always changed the subject when family came up, or why I spent holidays alone, or why I didn't have a single photo of my childhood on my bookshelves. The only thing on my bookshelf that even hinted at who I used to be was a small, silver frame. Inside was a faded photo of Stephanie and me, ages 7 and 4, standing on the edge of Lake Michigan, holding hands. My father had taken it. We were both squinting into the sun, and she was smiling so wide. She looked like joy itself. That photo, I kept it hidden between the pages of an old novel. I hadn't looked at it in years. Until the night Ethan asked if I wanted to spend Thanksgiving with him. He offered it casually. We could do a cabin thing, just us. Or we could go to your family's place. I'd love to meet them. He said it with that same warmth that had made me fall for him. Not pressure, just possibility. And I panicked. Because deep down, I knew what would happen if Stephanie laid eyes on Ethan. He was her type, thoughtful, attractive, understated. The kind of man who'd listen when she laughed too loud and tilt his head just enough to make her feel brilliant. I'd seen her do it before, more than once. But this time, something in me shifted. It wasn't just fear, it was calculation. And for once, I leaned in. I told Ethan the truth, or at least part of it. I said, my family's complicated. My sister and I, we don't see eye to eye. He chuckled. Who does my middle sister still thinks I owe her a hamster from 1997? I smiled, but didn't laugh. Then I said it. She has a history of getting a little too close to people I date. Ethan's eyebrows rose, like flirting. I nodded, and then some. He didn't flinch, just reached over and held my hand. Amanda, I love you, and nothing's going to change that. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat on my apartment floor with the photo in my hand, running my thumb across the glass. Stephanie's smile burned brighter than I remembered. Like she knew even then, like she'd always known she could take anything from me and never be stopped. Until now. It was Thanksgiving week. I told my parents we'd be flying in. My mother sounded thrilled. Bring something nice. Your sister just got promoted to store manager. Of course she had. I warned Ethan again on the plane. She's beautiful, charismatic. Just don't be surprised if she tries to dominate every conversation. He laughed. That's what I have you for. You're the only one who ever beats me at Scrabble. I'm immune to charm. But no one is immune to precision.
And Stephanie didn't play games. She orchestrated.
The moment we stepped into my parents' house, she appeared like a magician pulling herself from smoke. Ethan, she beamed, like they'd known each other in another life. You're even cuter than Amanda described. I saw him flinch, slight, barely there. But I saw it. She spent dinner dissecting every detail of his job. Oh, you work in UX. That's so fascinating. Do you think interfaces are becoming too intuitive? Ethan, being polite, obliged. She laughed at all his jokes, corrected none of his grammar, and even referenced a book I'd told her about years ago, one she'd mocked back then. Now she said it changed her perspective. She wore a deep emerald dress, her signature color, and brushed her hair behind her ear every time she asked Ethan a question. I counted. 7 times. And here's the part I haven't told you yet. I'd planted a camera, hidden in the bookshelf across the room, right next to that photo of us as kids, now placed intentionally, front and center. It wasn't just for protection, it was for documentation. Because this time, I wasn't going to leave the truth up for debate. This time, I was going to capture it. I didn't expect Ethan to fall. I really didn't. But I needed to know, once and for all. Because if she tried again, and if he followed, I'd rather see it clearly than wonder for the rest of my life whether I was just paranoid. Over the next few days, Ethan grew quiet, more distracted. His phone buzzed more. He smiled at things he didn't explain. I knew the signs. I'd lived them before. But I didn't confront him. I waited. Waited for the moment when the pattern would repeat, when she'd pull the same string she always did. And when she did, I'd be ready. I replayed the footage 3 times before I could breathe. There was no sound, just the grainy, quiet stillness of my parents' living room, captured from a high bookshelf. The angle was perfect. You could see the dining table, the hallway, the edge of the kitchen counter where everyone naturally lingered after meals. The light was soft, Thanksgiving cozy, with my mom's battery-powered candles flickering like a Pinterest dream. And there they were, Stephanie and Ethan. The first few clips were innocuous. She brushed past him, lightly touching his back as she reached for more wine. He laughed politely. That was day 1. Day 2 was different. Ethan stood at the counter, scrolling through his phone. Stephanie entered, holding a pie dish, hair pulled back like she always did when she wanted to seem low effort. She set the dish down beside him, leaned in, too close, said something too low for the camera to pick up, and then she touched his hand. It wasn't overt, not seductive in a movie scene way, but it lingered. And Ethan didn't move. I paused the frame, zoomed in. Her expression, that same half smile I knew too well, calculated, confident, like she already knew the answer to a question no one had asked. And him? He smiled back. Not a big smile, but a real one, the kind he used to give me when I'd surprise him with coffee on deadlines. The kind that once felt like home. I sat there, laptop balanced on my thighs, heart beating like it wanted to claw its way out of me. I didn't cry, not this time. I just stared at the screen, watching the tiny gestures that held all the truth I'd tried to deny, and something inside me, something old and quiet and waiting, snapped awake.
The next morning, I tested him. Over breakfast, I mentioned the camera casually.
My dad's new security system's ridiculous, I said, slicing into a cold waffle. He even put motion sensors in the bookshelf. He's convinced burglars love literature. Ethan looked up, blinked, then chuckled. Guess they're targeting first editions now. His voice didn't crack. His hand didn't flinch. But he didn't ask which bookshelf. Didn't ask where the sensors were. And that silence said everything. Stephanie, on the other hand, turned her head just slightly, just enough for me to see the muscle in her jaw tighten. Gotcha. Later that day, I went up to my old room and retrieved the photo again. That one of us at Lake Michigan. I stared at it like it was a stranger. In the picture, Stephanie's holding my hand so tightly. Our knuckles are white. I used to think that meant she felt safe with me. But now I wondered if even then, she was already taking what she wanted, gripping tighter than I realized.
And maybe I'd always let her.
That's what this was really about. Not just Ethan, not Daniel, not Jake. It was about me, about how I kept walking back into a fire, convinced it wouldn't burn me if I was just better, kinder, more forgiving. But now I was done. That night, my parents hosted the family game night they do every Thanksgiving. A tradition that was supposed to bring us together, but always ended in snide remarks and someone storming off. This time, I let it play out. I played nice. I let Stephanie win at Pictionary even though she guessed airplane when Ethan drew a toaster. I laughed when she called me the intense one. I nodded when my mother said, "It's so nice to have both girls home." But under the table, I was holding my phone, and in my camera roll, I had every clip. After dessert, I told them I was tired. Ethan followed me upstairs. Eyes unsure now. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Did I do something?" he asked quietly. I didn't respond, not right away. Instead, I walked to the desk, opened my laptop, and played the clip. Stephanie, touching his hand. Him, smiling. He stared, swallowed hard. "That's not what it looks like," he said. I turned, arms crossed. "Then explain it to me." He stood up, pacing. She came on to me. "Yeah, okay, but I didn't do anything back." "You didn't stop it either." I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I laughed. Sharp, too loud. "Hurt her feelings, Ethan. She's been stealing from me my entire life. This wasn't a mistake. This was her favorite game." He looked at me, then really looked, and for the first time, I saw panic. Not because he'd been caught, but because he finally realized I'd known all along. And I wasn't just a broken woman airing grievances. I was prepared. I told him the whole thing. How I brought him home not out of naivety, but as a test. A test he failed. His face turned pale, so this was a setup. I shrugged. Call it strategy. He stood there, speechless. And that's when I dropped the final card. "I'm sending this to your email, along with all the texts I backed up from your phone." He flinched. "You read my texts." "You let her text you." He opened his mouth, closed it, and sat back down. I turned, walked to the dresser, and opened the top drawer. Inside was the frame. I held it out. "Do you know what this is?" He nodded slowly. "You and your sister." I looked at it one last time, then placed it, face down, on the dresser. "I used to think I had to hold on to this to prove I still loved her," I said. "But maybe letting go is the real love, the kind that protects me." He didn't follow when I left the room. I went downstairs, said goodnight to my parents, and slipped my phone into my coat pocket. Stephanie was on the couch, glass of wine in hand, eyes smug. But not for long, because what I did next, that was the real beginning. The next morning, I woke up before the sun.
Not because I couldn't sleep, but because I had work to do.
For years, I'd been playing defense, dodging Stephanie's jabs, absorbing the blows in silence, pretending it didn't hurt when people chose her charm over my consistency. But that was over.
This time, I wasn't going to defend. I was going to deliver.
I brewed a pot of coffee and sat alone in the kitchen, watching the steam rise in the early morning stillness. The walls of my parents' home had never felt more paper thin. Their silence, their unwillingness to ever call Stephanie out, it was deafening now. I opened my laptop, pulled up my email. The video files were already zipped. The subject line had been written in my head for days.
This is what you've been ignoring.
I attached the video of Stephanie and Ethan. I included a few screenshots of their texts, just the clearest ones. Not the most salacious. I didn't need drama. I needed truth. And I BCC'd exactly 4 people. My parents. My Aunt Claire. The only relative who'd ever once said to me, "You don't have to forgive everything." And myself. For record keeping.
I hovered over the send button.
My hands were steady.
And I clicked.
It didn't feel like fire. It felt like air.
Like something old and bitter finally leaving my lungs.
I closed my laptop, took a breath, and went outside. The morning was cold crisp. Midwest autumn kind of cold. Leaves scattered like confetti across the lawn. I wrapped my sweater tighter and stood on the porch, watching the sunrise slice through the trees. Stephanie came outside 10 minutes later, barefoot, coffee in hand, smiling like nothing had changed. "You're up early," she said.
"So are you." She leaned against the railing. "Look, I know you're upset, but can we not make this weekend weird? Mom's already stressing over the turkey?"
I didn't respond.
She turned toward me. "Amanda, come on. It was just harmless flirting." I looked at her. Really looked.
The way she sipped her coffee, the perfect nails, the way she tilted her head like every confrontation was a negotiation she'd already won.
And I said, "You should check your email."
Her smile wavered just a flicker, but it was enough. She turned and went back inside. 5 minutes later, I heard the scream. It wasn't rage. It was something worse, insult. Stephanie's footsteps pounded back down the hallway, and she threw open the back door, eyes wide with fury. "You sent that to Mom."
"And Dad, and Claire, and Ethan."
She was shaking. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I crossed my arms. "I showed them what you did. There's a difference." Her mouth opened, but no words came. Because for once, she couldn't charm her way out of it. There was video. There were texts. There were receipts. And there was me finally willing to burn the bridge. We didn't talk for the rest of the day. My mom, of course, tried to pretend it was fine, set the table, served turkey, asked everyone to say something they were thankful for.
No one said anything.
Not even Dad. He looked at his plate the whole meal.
And when dessert came, Stephanie didn't show up at all.
Later that night, Aunt Claire pulled me aside in the hallway. She wasn't dramatic, never had been. Just took my hand and said, "About damn time."
That was it, 3 words.
But they stuck. I didn't go back to that house for Christmas.
I didn't answer my mother's calls.
But Ethan, he called. Twice.
And on the 3rd try, I picked up.
He sounded tired, hollow. "Amanda, I messed up."
I waited.
He kept talking. I didn't sleep with her. I swear. God, I didn't know how to shut it down without causing a scene. Your family, your mom. I cut him off. "I didn't send that email to shame you, Ethan. I sent it because I wanted to stop pretending." Silence. "I don't need a man who's afraid to cause a scene when someone disrespects me," I said. "I need someone who knows how to take a side."
"I want to fix this," he said.
And that's when I laughed. Not cruelly, just with release.
Then you're not hearing me.
Because this wasn't about fixing anything. This was about freedom. He didn't call again.
And you know what? That was fine.
Because sometimes the people who disappoint you aren't villains.
They're just mirrors showing you who you've become to survive.
I took that photo of Stephanie and me, the one from Lake Michigan, and burned it. Not out of hate, but out of clarity. Some bonds don't deserve to be displayed on mantles. Some are meant to be severed. But here's the twist no one saw coming. Stephanie. She wasn't done. Because 3 weeks later, she posted a family healing video on TikTok. A montage of us as kids. Voiceover, soft piano music, quotes about forgiveness. And her caption, "No matter what, she'll always be my sister. I forgive her." As if I was the one who needed forgiving. The comments poured in. "Wow, you're so mature. She's lucky to have you. Blood is thicker than betrayal." And that's when I realized this wasn't just about us anymore. In part 5, I'll show you how I took back my voice, publicly, fully, and how I turned her fake redemption arc into the final nail in her carefully curated coffin. Because if you want to play the victim online, you better hope the real story doesn't come with receipts. Her voice floated through my phone speakers like a hymn. Soft, contrived, scripted within an inch of sincerity. The video was barely 60 seconds. Stephanie, sitting on a white couch, hair curled just so, minimal makeup, her authentic look. Childhood footage played in the background. Us riding bikes, splashing in sprinklers. Me, holding her hand as she learned to roller skate.
"I believe," her voiceover began, "that forgiveness is strength. Even when someone hurts you deeply, love finds its way back."
She closed it with a sigh, one of those heavily performed exhales meant to signal peace, closure. "And then she'll always be my sister, no matter what." I stared at the screen in disbelief. The audacity was Olympic level. She was painting herself as the wounded one, the brave, forgiving sibling offering grace to the estranged older sister too bitter to heal. The comments exploded. "Stephanie, this is so inspiring. You're doing the right thing. Some people just can't grow. Your sister doesn't deserve you. Keep shining." That last one, it got over 1,000 likes. And as I scrolled, I could feel it, that old burn in my chest. But this time, it didn't feel like shame. It felt like fuel. Because if she wanted to make this public, fine. Let's go public. But not her version of the story. Mine. I didn't post a revenge TikTok. I didn't post a crying selfie. I wrote one long, deliberate, calmly constructed post on Medium. When your sister isn't the victim. A personal story about gaslighting, family image, and choosing self-respect over silence. I laid it all out. Years of subtle sabotage. The Daniel incident. The Jake texts. The Thanksgiving video. The fake forgiveness post designed to rehabilitate her image with zero accountability. And I didn't name names. Not once. But I didn't have to. Everyone knew. The post didn't go viral immediately, but by day 3, it hit Reddit. From there, it was wildfire. The comment sections split. Some applauded the honesty. Some doubted me, of course. But I'd expected that. What I didn't expect, what caught me off guard, was the flood of DMs. Not from strangers. From women? So many women. Sisters, ex-wives, best friends turned enemies, people who'd been scapegoated, erased, sacrificed on the altar of someone else's charm. They weren't praising me. They were thanking me. For saying what we're not supposed to. For giving words to a kind of grief no one prepares you for. For not tying it up with a neat little bow. I spent hours reading. It didn't fix everything, but it made something shift. Then came the twist I hadn't planned. One of Stephanie's old friends, Lisa, messaged me. We hadn't spoken in years.
She used to sleep over at our house in middle school. They'd braid each other's hair, whisper until 2 a.m. I was always the background noise. Her message was short. I saw your post. I believe you. She did something similar to me in college. I didn't know how to explain it back then.
That was the moment I knew Stephanie's game wasn't new. I hadn't been her only target, just her longest one.
I replied, "Thank you for telling me. That matters more than you know."
We never spoke again. But I printed the message and folded it between the pages of the same novel where I used to hide the photo of us as kids. It felt like reclaiming space.
Meanwhile, Stephanie.
She tried to ignore the blowback. Posted a follow-up video about mental health boundaries and misinformation on the internet. But the comments turned. Wait, are you the sister from that Medium story? You should respond to what she actually said. Gaslighting 101. The likes slowed. The shares stopped.
Her moment passed.
But I didn't gloat. Because winning, for me, wasn't about watching her fall. It was about finally rising without her weight on my shoulders.
I got a message from Ethan 2 weeks later.
Just read your piece. I'm sorry. Truly.
I left it unread. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to answer anymore.
I'd already said everything I needed. And now, it was time to do what I hadn't done in years. Move forward.
Not for show. Not for her approval.
But for me. Which brings me here, sitting in a quiet cafe, typing this story, looking out at strangers walking past windows, wondering how many of them are quietly carrying wounds from people they still have to call family.
The barista calls my name.
I take my drink, settle back into my seat, and glance at the notification on my phone.
An email from my mother.
Subject, we need to talk. The subject line was simple, but loaded. We need to talk. My mother had never been one for long messages. Emotions made her uncomfortable. She was the type to buy you a sweater instead of saying, "I'm proud of you." I opened the email and braced myself.
Amanda, I read what you wrote. I don't agree with your version of things. You've always been too sensitive. Stephanie has her flaws. But you've never been easy either.
We are a family. Families don't do this. I think you owe your sister an apology. If you want to come for Christmas, I suggest you fix this. Love, Mom.
I stared at the screen.
Not because I was surprised, but because even after everything, part of me had still hoped. Hoped that once the truth was undeniable, someone, anyone would choose me. Not out of obligation, out of fairness. But there it was. I owed her an apology. Not for what I'd done.
For breaking the narrative.
The family myth. Stephanie is golden. Amanda is difficult. Stephanie makes mistakes. Amanda holds grudges. Stephanie charms. Amanda accuses. And heaven forbid that story get rewritten. I didn't respond.
Instead, I forwarded the email to Aunt Claire.
She called me 20 minutes later.
"Your mother's lost her damn mind," she said. "No greeting."
That was her love language rage on my behalf. I'm not surprised, I said quietly, but it still stings. Claire exhaled into the phone. You know, I always thought she just didn't see it. But now I wonder if she needed to not see it. Because admitting what Stephanie's done means admitting how long she let it happen. That hit me harder than I expected. Because it was true. For my mother to acknowledge Stephanie's cruelty would mean facing her own complicity. And that was probably too much. I spent the rest of the day walking through the city, letting the cold bite at my cheeks. I passed shop windows full of twinkling lights, smiling families, ugly Christmas sweaters. But none of it felt real. It all felt like noise. I stopped at a bookstore, one of those quiet, creaky places that smell like old wood and older paper. I wandered aimlessly until I ended up in the self-help section. Not because I believed in quick fixes, just curiosity. My fingers landed on a book titled, When the Family Narrative is a Lie. I bought it, read it in 2 days. highlighted entire chapters. One line gutted me. You are not obligated to keep bleeding so others can avoid guilt. I copied it onto a Post-it and stuck it above my desk. Because that was the truth of it. That was why my mother emailed me instead of calling. Why she didn't mention the video. Why she refused to even say Stephanie's name. She wasn't protecting Stephanie. She was protecting herself. And for once, I wasn't willing to pay that price. I declined the Christmas invitation. I didn't explain. I didn't argue. I just wrote, I hope you have a peaceful holiday. I'm choosing peace too. Amanda. Weeks passed. I blocked Stephanie on every platform. I deleted the photos, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I let silence become my sanctuary. Until New Year's Eve, that's when it happened. I got a message on LinkedIn of all places. From Daniel? Yes, that Daniel. The first guy Stephanie ever stole from me? We hadn't spoken in nearly 8 years. The message was short. Hi, Amanda. I just read your post. I had no idea. I'm sorry. My stomach flipped. I clicked on his profile. New job, new city, married, apparently, but still reaching out. I replied. Took you long enough? He wrote back. I deserve that. If you ever want to talk, I'd be glad to. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about Stephanie anymore. It was about how many people had watched it happen and said nothing. People like Daniel. People like my mom. People like me. I had watched it too, for years. I'd rationalized, minimized, bit my tongue. And now I had a voice. But here's the twist. Having a voice doesn't mean using it to scream. Sometimes it means knowing when to stop speaking, when to walk away, when to let people sit in the silence they created. But just when I thought the dust was finally settling, I got a letter in the mail. Yes, a literal letter. Handwritten, no return address. Inside one photograph. Stephanie and me at Lake Michigan. The original, the one I'd burned. But here it was again. And on the back, in Stephanie's handwriting, one sentence. I still have the negatives. No punctuation, no explanation. Just a quiet reminder that even when you think you've let go, the past knows where to find you. I held the photo like it was radioactive. The edges were soft, like it had been handled a lot, or maybe Stephanie had kept it tucked somewhere, thumbing it absently over the years. Our faces smiled back in that forced, frozen way kids do when a parent yells, "Say cheese," but there was something else there too. Something I hadn't noticed before. In that moment, I wasn't just holding a photo. I was holding proof of a narrative I never authored, but had always been trapped in. And the sentence on the back, I still have the negatives. It wasn't a threat, not exactly. Stephanie never operated that directly. It was a reminder, a message wrapped in nostalgia and veiled power. She was saying, you might have told your story, but I still have the original. Like she owned the truth. Like she was the archivist of our shared childhood. I sat at the kitchen table, the morning light filtering through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the letter. Part of me wanted to rip it in half, toss it in the trash. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out a pen and wrote 4 words on the back of the envelope. Then you keep them. I mailed it back with no return address. Closure, it turns out, doesn't always come with grand declarations. Sometimes it's quiet, passive, a refusal to play the game anymore. That was my final move. And it felt clean. In the weeks that followed, I didn't hear from Stephanie again. No new videos. No subtweets. Just silence. But not the kind that suffocates. The kind that opens up new space. And in that space, I started living again. I went back to therapy. I joined a writing group, real people, face to face, who didn't know anything about my family and didn't care. All they knew was that I wrote well, and that I showed up every Thursday with iced coffee and edits. I even went on a few dates. One was awkward. One was sweet. One ended with an accidental kiss in a bookstore aisle that felt like a scene from a life I'd been too scared to imagine before. But the biggest change, I stopped apologizing. For existing, for not being easy, for saying too much, for saying too little. I didn't know anyone's softness that would cost me my spine. And slowly, something in me stitched itself back together. It wasn't perfect. Healing never is. There were nights I still woke up remembering the email from my mom, or that final glance from Ethan, or the bitter smile Stephanie gave me the last time we stood in the same room. But those memories stopped owning me. They became just that, memories. Pages I no longer needed to reread. One afternoon in spring, I walked by the lake alone, the same lake from that old photo. The breeze was sharp, but not unfriendly. The water glittered like it was winking at me. And I had a thought I never expected. What if none of this was ever about her? What if all those years of pain and betrayal and silence were building something in me, not just breaking me down? What if the fire wasn't meant to destroy me, but to forge something stronger? Because here's the truth. No one tells you about revenge. The real kind isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's not about exposing people. It's about exposing yourself to your own power, your own clarity, your own peace. It's about becoming someone who no longer needs to be understood by those who refuse to see you. So here's my final twist. I didn't forgive Stephanie, but I forgave myself for waiting so long to choose me, for thinking love had to hurt, for letting someone else write the story of who I was supposed to be. That's over now. If you're listening to this and it hits close to home, if you've got your own Stephanie, your own photo, your own history of shrinking just to keep the peace, I hope you hear me. You are not crazy. You are not too much. You are not wrong for walking away from the people who built a version of you that benefits them but kills you. You don't need a dramatic ending to justify your exit. You just need a beginning. And this is mine. Thank you for walking through this with me. If this story moved you, helped you, made you feel a little less alone, drop a comment, share your story, hit subscribe. Not for me. For you? Because when one woman tells the truth, she becomes a torch. And someone out there, someone like me 5 years ago, is still fumbling in the dark. Let's light the way.